In this episode, we're going to look at switch security configuration. I'll show you how to do it, and we'll talk about the concepts along the way. We are enhancing security on 2-access switches in a partially configured network. We will implement a range of security measures. Routing has been configured on this network, so connectivity between hosts on different VLANs should function when we are complete. We'll be discussing creating a secure trunk, secure unused switch ports, implement port security, enabling DHCP snooping, and finally configuring rapid PVST, PortFast, and BPDU guard. Greetings to all my tech heads out there in the KevTechify nation, and if you're new here, welcome. This episode is part of my series on configuration examples for the CCNA. I'm Kevin here at KevTechify. Let's get this adventure started. Switch security configuration. I have the packet tracer lab open. On the left side, I have our work area, I have our topology. This is where we're going to do all the configuration. On the right side, I have our instructions. At the top here, we have a VLAN table. Gives us some information about what we're going to do. It's what device we're on, the different VLANs, the names of those VLANs, and then what ports are part of those VLANs, and what networks they serve. We have all of this information right here. Couple things to notice. We have a native VLAN, which is VLAN 100. So we're changing that from the default VLAN. And then we're creating this black hole VLAN. Black hole VLAN leads nowhere. It leads to a black hole. Can't get anywhere on our network on that. Here's our objectives. Create a secure trunk, secure unused ports, implement port security, enable DHCP snooping, and then configure rapid PVST, PortFast, and bridge protocol data unit guard. Our instructions. Step 1, create a secure trunk. Several steps to do that. First step is connect the G02 ports of the 2-access layer switches. Here's our 2-access layer switches. That's these two devices right here. We're going to create a trunk between them connecting our G02 ports. To do that, what we do is on the bottom left corner, click on the connections icon. And then in the center where this menu pops up, what we want to do is click on our copper straight through. Click on our copper straight through. Our icon changes to an end of a network cable. Got an RJ45 on one end and a cable coming out. That's signifying you're plugging it into that port on the device. I'm going to come up here to the left switch, click on that, and connect that into the gigabit Ethernet 02 port. That's the only gig port available. And then it shows that I'm connected to gig 2 and I can connect it in somewhere else. I'm going to go ahead and click on the right switch, switch 2. Click on that and connect it into the gig Ethernet 2 port. Once again, it's the only gig port available. Go ahead, connect those up. Give it a second. Should think about it. While it's doing it, go on to step 1B. Configure ports G01 and G02 as static trunks on both switches. We're going to go ahead and manually say you are a trunk. I'm going to go ahead and click on switch 1 here. Opens up the configuration window. I make it a little bit bigger right to left to help the wrapping. As you can see, gig 02 came up. That's what we are looking for. Hit enter a couple of times. There's no password set up on there, so we have easy access for our lab. Go ahead and type enable. It gets us into privilege exec mode. It is telling me we have a native VLAN mismatch here. And so we're going to have to look at that and figure out what's going on and correct that. So configure gig ports G01 and G02. I'm doing 2 ports, so I can use the range command and cover all of those at one time. Command here is interface space range, and then our starting port G0/1, and then space dash space. That's important to have the space dash space in there. If you don't put the spaces in there, it's going to give you an error. And then you put the last port number. Here, our last port number is 2. Oh, look at that. And in typical Cisco fashion, where if you type something in wrong, it'll let you know. If you type something in right, it won't. Here, I typed in the command. It is right, but what's wrong with it? I was in the wrong mode. I was just in privilege exec mode. I need to be in global configuration mode. And we have another message saying you have a VLAN mismatch error. And yep, we'll come in and we'll take care of that in a second. So get into global configuration mode, config T, interface space range space G0/1 space dash space 2. Once again, our prompt changes here that we're configuring an interface range. And what we want to do here is statically set it as a trunk. And that's changing our switch port mode. Switch port, I spell switch port correctly, and then mode and trunk. This is where we statically say you are a trunk. You can't be anything else. If we don't specify anything, that's where that dynamic trunking protocol comes in and tries to negotiate a trunk. But once we say you're a trunk, that's what you are. You can also say an access port at this time, but what we're doing is we're setting up that trunk. Notice we're getting some more errors. The gig 01 went down. It made the mode, switch port mode to trunk, brought that up. Same thing here for switch 2, did that. Now we're getting a bridge protocol data unit error saying inconsistent VLAN ID. And so we're having some issues, and we're gonna have to work through and take care of that. Now we need to disable DTP negotiations on both sides of the link. And so on switch 1 and switch 2 for port 2, we need to disable DTP negotiation. On both sides of the connections, we need to do that. Now, I have to get out of the range because we're only looking at the gig 02 interface. What I can do here is just type in interface. I could type exit and then retype this interface command, but we are looking at gig 0/2. Now notice we are just working on a single interface. We can tell that from the prompt. And we need to disable DTP negotiation. That is setting the switch port to non-negotiate. So we are looking at our switch. Okay, I got to spell switch port correctly. Switch port. And then non-negotiate. Non-negotiate. I spelled non-negotiate. What happened here is as I'm typing in switch port non-negotiate, it gave me that problem saying we're having a native VLAN mismatch error. Didn't know what it was because it stuck that message in there. So I up arrowed, I did the command again, and then it gave me my little caret saying it's right here. If you look up there, I got too many N's in the center. So what I'm going to do is up arrow, left arrow over, get rid of one of the N's. And now we are non-negotiating. Step 1D, create VLAN 100 and give it the name native on both switches. I have to go to both switches and create that. Well, I'm on switch 1. Oh, hang on. I got to go back here. I have to disable DTP negotiation on both sides. I'm going to go ahead, minimize our switch 1 window, click on switch 2 and hit that. I forgot to do that. Log in, type enable for privilege exec mode, config T for global configuration mode. And then we have to go into that interface. We are on interface gig 02. So interface G0/2 and looking at switch port settings and non-negotiate. Oh, look at that. What it's saying is it's a dynamic port. It's DTP. And I forgot to do the step before that and finish it. I had to do both switches and set that as, set G01 and G02 as trunks. Okay, so let's do the interface range command. So interface range. Okay, it's giving me mismatch errors and stuff like that. I'm just going to start the whole command over because I got some typo errors. So interface space range, and then we want G0/1 space dash space to 2, and set those as a trunk. Once again, to set it as a trunk, the command is switch port mode trunk. We get some messages that went down. We changed the setting. We came back up. Something about some VLANs and BPDU inconsistencies. We'll work through those as we go. Now, back down here, disable DTP negotiations on both sides of the link. As long as I have, I'm on switch 2, I need to change to just the G02 interface. And so type in my interface command. I could type exit and then type the interface command. And then put the interface G0/2. Takes me into just the one interface. We can tell that by the command prompt. And here, this is where we type in non-negotiate. I spelt that all wrong. But once again, it's telling me I did something wrong. I forgot the first word, switchport. And then non-negotiate. Stopping DTP negotiation. Now we have to create VLAN 100 on both switches. As long as I'm on switch 2 right here, I'm going to create that. So exit out to global configuration mode. Here on switch 2, go ahead, create the VLAN by saying interface VLAN 100. Exit out of that, and then we type in VLAN 100 because we're going to put some settings on VLAN 100. Oh, we go into VLAN 100. My fault, I typed in the wrong command. So VLAN 100, now that it's created, or it brings it up. So we created it with interface VLAN 100, and now we entered into it. It brings that to up. Now we can go ahead and name it. Once again, we want to name it native, so capital N-A-T-I-V-E. Capital N is important, otherwise you won't get credit for it. We named it. Let's jump on to switch 1 quickly, create it and name it. We are in interface configuration mode, type exit once, and then interface VLAN 100. There we go, exit out, type in VLAN 100, brings it up and online, and now we can name it native. Next step, on to step 1E, configure all trunk ports on both switches to use VLAN 100 as the native VLAN. Configure all trunk ports. We got to do all trunk ports, and that's a range. So we are in configuration of a VLAN. Let's exit out once to global configuration. Then we can use the interface range command. So interface space range. And notice how I keep typing and it gave me a system update. Some people, they get bothered by that. Me, I've just learned to keep typing and go with it. So I got interface space range space, and now we can put our starting address or starting port G0/1 and then space dash space. And our ending port is 2. Configure all trunk ports on both switches to use VLAN 100. And from here, we set the native VLAN, and that's part of the switch port configurations. And specifically, we're talking about our trunking settings. So switch port space trunk, and then we're going to set the native space VLAN to 100. So our command here is switchport space trunk space native space VLAN space 100. Go ahead, entered that in. We get some system updates. We're still having some issues with BPDU. We did unblock gig 01 here. Port consistency restored. Hopefully that's going to take care of the VLAN mismatch right here. Because if we look at the VLAN mismatch error, it said native VLAN mismatch discovered on gig 01. Gig 01 had its native VLAN set as 1 with DSL gigabit Ethernet 10/1 was set to 100. And now that we set it to 100 on our device, this now changes it to 100, and we should stop getting this native VLAN mismatch. Now we're getting a new one. Now we're saying we have a native VLAN mismatch with gig 02. That's our trunk port to switch to, where it's saying on switch 2, our gig Ethernet is set to 1. Our gigabit Ethernet 02 is set to 1. We haven't done that. Let's go ahead and do that. Hopefully we'll take care of our errors. Minimize the switch 1 window, click on switch 2, bring it up. As you can see, we're getting 2 mismatch errors now. One with switch 1 and one with DSL. When we change both of these gig 02 and gig 01 to VLAN 100 as the native VLAN, it should take care of those errors. We are currently configuring a VLAN here. I'm going to go ahead and type exit. Get into the range of our gig interfaces. So I can go ahead and type interface, range, and then G0/1, space 2. We are configuring a range of ports. And then we're going to set that native VLAN. And so we're working with our switch port settings, particularly our trunks. And the value we are setting is for our native VLAN, and we want the native VLAN to be 100. Go ahead, type that in. It gave me an error. And this is where a lot of people don't like what's going on, because I was in the middle of typing. It gave me a system update. Specifically, we have a VLAN mismatch, and I continued typing. But now this little arrow is pointing up to the middle of nowhere, and it's saying I have an error. For me, the easy way is just hit up arrow once, type it. But of course, another error another warning popped up. Hit up arrow one more time, hit enter, and now it's saying you have a problem right here. Oh, I spelled switchport wrong. No news is good news. So I got news, which is bad news. Okay, to fix that, all I do is hit the up arrow, left arrow over, get to the point where that is, but I got another error message, so I just hit enter, up arrow, left arrow over, correct the spelling for switchport, and hit enter. You will see that this happens to you quite a bit, and it's just something I've learned to deal with. Now I went and hit enter. Now we are unblocking consistencies for the port. G01 VLAN 1 port consistency restored. They unblocked it. This should stop all of our VLAN mismatch errors. On to step 2. Step 2 is secure unused ports. What we're going to do is shut down all unused ports on switch 1. Shut down all unused ports on switch 1. I'm going to go ahead and minimize the switch 2 window I have open. Bring up our switch 1 window. Notice we have port consistencies restored by changing those settings on switch 2. We should not get any more VLAN mismatch errors. If you do, you got to go back and look at your settings and make sure you have the native VLAN set correctly on both sides. We're in a range of ports. I'm going to go ahead and type exit right now. Global configuration mode is where we're at. All unused ports on switch 1. If we look up here, all of our unused ports, well, we're using ports 1 and 2, 10, 24, and gig 01 and gig 02. So what does that mean? We are not using 3 through 9 and 11 through 23. But we can use a range command and specify multiple ranges in that, non-contiguous addresses. Okay, back to our switch 1 window. So I can do a range. So it's interface space range space, and then we start with the first one. We're going to do our first range. You got to specify the start of that range. That is F0/1. And then you got to make sure you put your space in there. And then, nope, it's not F01. We're using 1 and 2. Our first range we're going to disable is 3. So it's F03, and then space-3. We're using 10, so 1 less than 10 is 9. So we're having the range of 3 to 9. We can put a comma in here because now we can specify some more ports. We're using port 10, but then we're not using port 11 through 23. And so our second range here, after I put the comma in, is F0/11 space 23. I did it correctly. Once again, how do I know? No news is good news from the Cisco operating system. Now, all we have to do is shut down all those ports. To shut it down, you just enter in the shutdown command. So go ahead and just type shutdown and hit enter. And we can see that we shut down all of our ports, starting with port 3 because we're using 1 and 2, goes all the way up to 9 and then skips 10 because that wasn't part of our range. We're using port 10 up here for the sales VLAN. And then we start with 11 again and go all the way to 23. We shut all of those administratively down. We did a shutdown command, but we don't do 24 because we look over here, port 24, we're using as part of our management VLAN. That takes care of step 2A. On to step 2B. On switch 1, create VLAN 99 and name it black hole. The configured name must match the requirement exactly. What that means is we need to have a capital B, a capital H, and no spaces in there. It needs to match exactly. Create the VLAN, exit out once, exit out twice. Oh, we should only did it once because we need to be in global configuration mode. Go ahead and type config T, bring us back into that. Create the VLAN. All we have to do is type in VLAN 99. It creates it. From here, we can go ahead and type name and then black hole. Once again, capital BLACK, capital HOLE, no space in there. And that creates it and names it. Moved all unused switch ports to black hole VLAN, or to the black hole VLAN. So all unused ports again. Once again, unused ports goes from 3 to 9, from 11 to 23. I'm going to exit out of configuring our VLAN here in our switch 1 window. Now I can do our interface range command again. So interface space range, and then start off with our first port, F0/3 space. Our last one for the first range is 9. We can specify another range by putting a comma in there. I put a comma in the space. Now we put our first port for the second range in there, F0/11. We're using 10 but not 11, and that goes to port 23. So I put a space and 23 in there. We'll let you know a little shortcut. I could have used up arrow to get there, but I typed it in again. And we are now configuring a range of ports. Once we're in there, we can now put those ports into our black hole VLAN, which is VLAN 99. And now we're dealing with our switch port settings. So I go ahead and type switch port, and this is an access port setting. So it's switch port access. And then we want to say it goes into VLAN 999. That moves all of these ports in this range, all the ports we're not using, into connecting into 99. So if for some reason somebody would activate it, they would connect in, they would go into the black hole, which is connected to nothing else on our network. Takes care of step 2C. We are done with step 2. On to step 3. I hope you're liking this episode on practical configuration examples. Leave a comment on what you think about these configuration examples. If you still have a question or comment, please let me know below. You can also visit my website at KevTechify.com for all of my details and how to get these episodes in video and podcast form. Implement port security. Now, for step 3A, what they're going to say here is activate port security on all active access ports on switch 1. So all the active access ports. If we scroll up and look here on switch 1, all of our active switch ports, well, F01, F02, we have end devices connected to that. They're associated with the network. We have F010, that's associated with the network. We have a network, the sales network. Here's a network address. Same thing with port 24. Now, gig 0102 is not associated with a network, but that was set up to be our trunks between the switches and then the black hole VLAN. So the ones we are using here are fast Ethernets 1, 2, 10, and 24. Now we can use the range command to cover all these and apply our port security in one layer. If we go back to our switch 1 window, you can see we are in an interface range, but it is the wrong range. It's actually the complete opposite range of what we need. And so I could type exit and then do the interface range command, or I could just go ahead and type the interface range command right now, which I'm going to do. So interface space range, and then I can just list out all of those ports. So F0/1, comma space F0/2. Yeah, I could have did a space -2 after that, or I could list out each one of them. It's 6 of one, half a dozen the other, which is easier. Then comma F0/10, and then another comma F0/24. It'll get all 4 of those ports, whatever commands I enter in next. Now, once again, to refresh our memory, our goal is to activate port security on all those ports. Now, to activate port security, it's part of our switch port settings. So it's switch port and then port-security. Make sure I spell security right. And that turns on port security on those 4 ports. Turns that on. Step 3B, configure the active ports to allow a maximum of 4 MAC addresses to be learned on the ports. Now, we're going to use our same range here, but now we're going to say the maximum is 4. Once again, we can just go ahead and type that command in. This is dealing with our switch port settings. So we start off with switch port, and we're looking at the port security group. So port-security. And this is where we go and we're setting a maximum of 4 MAC addresses that's allowed. So maximum, space, and then the number 4. That set it to saying only 4 MAC addresses per port. On to step 3C, for port F01 on switch 1, statically configure the MAC address of the PC using port security. So they want us to statically assign the PC that's connected to it. Oofda. What we need to do is figure out what the MAC address is of this one. Couple ways of doing that. Probably the easiest way is what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this PC because this is where fast Ethernet is. I'm going to open up that PC, slide this over, click on command prompt, and then type in ipconfig, right, /all. I hit an extra button. And then here is my MAC address. 0010.11e8.3cbb. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to manually or statically program that MAC address as one of the MAC addresses that are allowed to connect. We go over here. We are in a range of IP addresses. We're in this range of ports. We need to be in just fast Ethernet 01. And so what we can do is just go ahead and type in interface and then fast 01. Hit enter. Notice we're only configuring a single port. We can tell that by the prompt. And here, this is where we're going to go and set this to be one of the MAC addresses we can look at. And that's, once again, we're dealing with our switch port settings. And specifically, we're looking at port security. So switch port space port dash security. And then we want to set that MAC address. So it's MAC dash address, and then we put that MAC address in. And it's the format Cisco uses. Cisco uses 4 hexadecimals, period, 4 hexadecimals, period, 4 hexadecimals to list the MAC addresses. And that's what we need to do. In the simulation here, that's what they're showing right here. Normally in the Microsoft Windows world, when you do an ipconfig/all in a true operating system, it'll be 2 hexadecimal numbers, colon 2 hexadecimal numbers, all the way up to 6 sets of 2 hexadecimal numbers. You just need to change those 2 hexadecimal numbers, colon 2 hexadecimal numbers into 4 hexadecimals, put a decimal, and change that in there. Getting back to our S1 window, we can go ahead and enter that in. 0010.11 E8.3 CBB. Now, it's not case sensitive, so we don't need to match case there. Some people do, some people don't. I don't. Go ahead and get that in there. Make sure you have it right. I'm just verifying I got the right MAC address. And that says on port 1, this is one of the MAC addresses that's allowed. It can learn 3 other ones for a maximum of 4, but this is one of those 4. It takes care of step 3C. On to step 3D. Configure each active access port so it'll automatically add MAC addresses learned on the port to the running configuration. And that's what we're talking about, is those sticky MAC addresses. Now, it says on all active access ports, which once again are F01, F02, F010, and F024. These 4 in there. I'm going to go ahead and just enter in our interface range command. So interface space range space F01 / comma space F0/2 comma, third port was 10, so F0/10, and the fourth port was 24, so F0/24. That is our range. Now that I have those ranges, I can enter in and come back down to where we were. We can configure sticky MAC addressing on those 4 ports with one command. Once again, we are looking at our switch port settings, specifically the port-security settings, and we're looking at MAC addresses, and specifically we're looking at the MAC address, and we want it to be sticky. So whatever device is plugged into there, it will learn that, it will write it into the configuration. That way, if it ever has to reboot for whatever reason, that will remain those MAC addresses will remain in there. If we don't do sticky, it loses power. It'll have to go through and relearn all those MAC addresses again. And of course, I spelled security wrong, so I up arrow, left arrow over, make my spelling correction. And we get that set. That takes care of step 3D. On to step 3E. Configure the port security violation mode to drop packets from MAC addresses that exceed the maximum. So any more than the 4 we set earlier up here, so that exceeds the maximum. Generate a syslog entry, but does not disable the port. We don't want to disable it. What we want to do is just restrict it to those 4. And so the setting we want is 4. Now, it's the same range that we used up there, so we can just leave that range command, the interface settings correctly, and we can go ahead and put that command in here. Once again, we are looking at our switch port settings, specifically the the switch port settings, specifically the port-security settings. And we want to set what happens when we do a violation. So it's violation, and then we want to restrict it. And all we have to do is type the word restrict in there. sets it up to restrict it. That takes care of step 3E, which is all of step 3. On to step 4. Step 4 here, we're looking at configuring our DHCP snooping to prevent our DHCP attacks. What we're going to do is configure the trunk ports on S1 as trusted ports. The ports that are trunks on S1 are gig 01 and 02. So configure those as trusted ports. We're in a range of ports, but that was our active access port, so we need to do a different range. To do that, go ahead and enter in interface space range space and then our 2 gig ports. So G0/1 space dash space to number 2. That gives us a range of those gig ports, which is our trunking ports, and then we're going to set those as trusted. And what we're looking at here is part of the IP protocol. It's part of the IP, I shouldn't say protocol, it's part of the IP suite. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at specifically at DHCP and the snooping inside of DHCP. So it's IP space DHCP space snooping, and then we're going to set these ports, because that's what we're in the gig 01 and 02. We're going to say we trust them. So IP DHCP snooping trust. That's set as trust. Now we're going to limit the untrusted ports on switch 1 to 5 DHCP ports per second. Limit the untrusted ports. The untrusted ports are access ports. The access ports we are using, once again on switch 1, that's Fast Ethernet 1, 2, Fast Ethernet 10, and Fast Ethernet 24. So it's the range of those 4 ports that we need to set a limit of 5 DHCP packets per second. Coming back to our switch 1, we are in an interface range of gig 0, 1, and 2. We need to be in the range of 1, 2, 10, and 24. This time what I'm going to do is a little bit of a shortcut. I'm going to use the up arrow until I find the command, because I know I've entered this in before. Up arrow once, up arrow twice gives me the range. And as you can see, I'm working backwards. So right now I'm on this command. If I hit up arrow again, brings me to this command. Up arrow again a 4th time brings me back to the 4th command in my process. Up arrow again brings me back to the 5th command, which was where I got an error saying I spelled security wrong. And then the next one should be this, and it is. It's the interface range command for F0, 1, 2, 10, and 24. Now, it does go a lot quicker. All you have to do is hit up arrow, and you don't explain what happens, but it does happen a little bit faster. Hit enter. That gives me the correct range. Now I have to limit the 5 DHCP packets per second. To limit those 5 packets per second, what we're doing is, this is all part of the IP DHCP snooping. And so it's part of the IP protocol suite. So it's IP, and then we're looking at DHCP, and specifically we are looking at snooping, and we're going to set the limit at a rate of 5, and that's 5 per second. We're going to set all 4 of those ports to that rate of 5 DHCP packets per second. Now on switch 2, enable DHCP snooping globally for VLANs 10, 20, and 99. We need to switch over to switch 2. I'm going to minimize switch 1 window, click on switch 2. It's logged me out, but there's no password, so I hit enter, type in enable, type in config T for global configuration mode. To enable DHCP snooping globally, what we do from global configuration mode here is, once again, it's part of the IP suite here. So it's IP space DHCP, part of the DHCP protocol, and then we say snooping. Snooping. That's all we have to do. That enables it globally on switch 2. Last step here is enable enable it for VLANs 10, 20, and 99. While we're here in our global configuration mode, the command here is very similar to one we just entered. Part of the IP suite, we're looking at DHCP and then snooping. We're particularly interested in snooping. And now we're going to say, what VLANs do we want to run DHCP snooping on? This is the VLANs where, if we look at our chart here, your end devices are connecting in. We're looking at 10, 20, and 99. This is where the admin network is, the sales network, and your management network. These are where all end devices are connected into. So 10, 20, and 99. Right here, we're saying snooping, and then we're going to say what VLAN. So you type in VLAN, and then 10, 20, and 99. Okay, I got an error. That error says it's right here is that. Now, I didn't type 20 wrong. I put a 2 and a 0. Sometimes the error is right around there. And notice the space. I'm thinking that's what it is. I put a space in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to up arrow, left arrow over, delete those spaces out, and then run the command. And yes, I took the spaces out, and now it ran and completed successfully. No news is good news. That takes care of step 4. On to step 5. We're going to configure PortFast. We're going to go in there, configure a PortFast, and then once we do that, we are also going to set up our Bridge Protocol Data Unit Guard, BPDU Guard. Enable PortFast on all access ports that are in use on switch 1. And once again, all ports that are being used are 1, 2, 10, and 24. So we'll enable PortFast on all of those. I'm going to come over here, minimize our switch 2 window, click on switch 1, brings up our configuration window, hit enter just to make sure I'm logged in. If we look here, the last interface range I entered in is the range we needed. If you're not sure, if you're not positive that's exactly where you're at, I would just up arrow to find the right command and hit enter again, just to verify that you have those right settings, or those right ports specified in your range. Now we can go ahead and enable PortFast on there. And PortFast is part of a spanning tree. And the command here is spanning tree. Once I'm in my interface or my interface range, so spanning dash tree, and then just say PortFast. And that turns PortFast on for all of those interfaces. You get some warnings. Warning, PortFast should only be enabled on ports connected to a single host, only connected to an end device. You shouldn't enable PortFast on connections to networking devices, switches, routers, security. You shouldn't enable PortFast on connecting into servers, because a lot of times you're going to run trunking on that server. You get another warning here. PortFast has been configured on port 24, but it will only have an effect when the interface is in the non-trunking mode. Well, right now it's saying that port 24 is in the trunking mode. It's going to hold that until then. And if you notice, that's what all of them are saying. Oh, I guess I missed some of them. Each port gave us that feedback. So if I did switch one of these ports to trunking, PortFast would be disabled. Okay. Step 5A, PortFast done. Enable BPDU guard on all access ports that are in use. The same range again, we can enter in here. Enter in that same range. If you're not sure, up arrow, find the right command, enter it in. But I know this is the right command because I just did it. And the command here to turn on your BPD guard to enable it, once again, is it's the spanning tree command. So it's spanning dash tree and then space. And then what we want to type in there is BPDU guard. G-U-A-R-D, all one word, BPDU guard. And we want to turn it on, we want to enable it. Type in the word enable. And that enables BPDU guard on all the ports in our range. And that takes care of 5B. On to step 5C. Configure SW2 so that all access ports will use PortFast by default. So we want to globally set that. We want to globally set that, not on a per port basis, but we want to set that globally. I'm going to go ahead and minimize the S1 switch window. Click on SW2 for switch 2. I hit enter just to make sure I'm connected. We are in global configuration mode. We can tell that because we have config in the parentheses, and that's where we have to enter this in globally. All access ports. So for all access ports, we just need to set the spanning tree PortFast there. We are in global configuration mode. The command here, once again, is we're dealing with spanning tree. So it's spanning -tree. We want PortFast, and we want it set as the default. We want it to be turned on automatically. We want it to be set as the default. So spanning -tree space PortFast space default is our command right here. Go ahead and hit enter, bring that in. And now we set it up to all access ports. And that takes care of step 5C. That was Packet Tracer Lab 11.6.1 Switch Security Configuration. It was my pleasure to provide you with this wonderful episode on configuration examples. If you like this episode and you got value out of it, please click that like button, give a 5-star rating, leave a comment. This all helps me bring you more great content. Please take a minute to subscribe to my channel. All my socials and contact information are on my website, KevTechify.com. There you can find out how to get all these episodes in video and podcast form. Thank you so much for watching this episode of my series on practical configuration examples for the CCNA. I've created 4 wonderful playlists for you on the CCNA. These episodes, I go through all the concepts that Cisco calls out for the CCNA. Once again, I'm Kevin. This is KevTechify. I'll see you next time for another great adventure.